Good evening and welcome to the second season of the Solstice Speaker Series, sponsored by SGI. Built around the natural calendar, the Solstice Speaker Series is a four-part series occurring on or around the equinox. This series provides an opportunity to reflect on the emotion and changes that happen with each season. Topics are current, thought-provoking, and designed to create active participation towards truth and reconciliation. Tonight is the first episode of the year. The autumn equinox will be this Thursday, September 22nd, and additionally, our conversation is in advance of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. My name is Bailey Montserrat, and I'm the Curator of Indigenous Cultural Heritage at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. And I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land which we are gathered on today is Treaty 4 territory, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. We acknowledge the land in an act of reconciliation to those whose traditional territories we are on. We acknowledge those who have shared the land before us, those who continue to share the land, and those who share the land in the future. We further acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. We are committed to move forward in a partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. It's my honor tonight to start this evening on behalf of the RSM and the Friends of the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. To start us out, here's a few housekeeping items. Guests are encouraged to be aware of social distancing during the evening, and masks are welcome. Sanitization stations are located in the lobby. The washrooms are located to the left, just outside the theater entrance. There are 2 emergency exits at the back of the theater, 1 in the front, and our muster point is in the west parking lot. The tea and bannock supplied tonight was prepared by Chili for Children with the assistance of our Friends volunteers. Please remember to dispose of your trash properly, though. So now with those items covered, I would like to invite Knowledge Keeper Tom Petra from Musqueam First Nation up here to do a prayer for us. So Tim is 62 years old, a member of Musqueam First Nation. He currently resides on the reserve. He's a Lakota, Dakota, and enriched with ceremonial traditions and customs. He's the widower of his late wife of 35 beautiful years together. They have 2 sons, 10 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Tim lives a sober lifestyle and is a residential school survivor. He is entrusted to serve his Lakota people as a retired Sundance chief for the past 30 years. Tim has taken time to learn and earn the 7 sacred rights of the Lakota as a Lakota Dakota man. He has successfully completed a diploma in business administration from SIIT in Regina, and his passion is to practice the traditional lifestyle and provide ceremonial guidance of his enriched Lakota teachings. He continues to teach through the community engagement by facilitating traditional life skills. He has traveled across the nation and south of the medicine line to share ancestral knowledge. He's a funny and honest man who uses his life story and experiences throughout his teachings. Thank you, Tim.
Tanse aninsugo ambawashte ampatuashte hamitakiapi Wanchuka Hokshla Hemelo. We check ya. I forgot my tobacco. That's okay, they give it to me. Join me in prayer, you guys. We're going to pray to the ancestors the best we can. We have different denominations, different faiths. But I'm going to rely on all of you coming together with one prayer, one mind, one thought. Help me in that way. Ha tishina tonka, wambliglishka tonkashna, hina unchumaka, Wanchuka Hokshla Hemelo tonkashna. Wopila tonkashla petoshte imakia pi na oyate Regina tonkashla le unshika na tioshpa tonkashla unshika we check tonkashla we on piatanya sapa waziata in luta we on pati itoka gatiska imakia pi na oyate le unshika tonkashla le wochosni oshki woshpi uyushki tonkashla. I pray to the grandfather and ask that you look down upon each and every one of us in the Regina area, as well as our surrounding Tioshpa, as our nations at which we come from. Take pity upon the drum. These young people are going to enlighten us and sing as well as dance. Take pity upon us and hear our prayers today so we can come together to understand each other, hear each other, come together in a good way to share knowledge. I give thanks for this day and ask for your blessings in the things we're about to do. Hawa Makashkayas and Mitakias and all my relations.
Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Petra. for sharing those positive and reflective words. So I would like to welcome your host for the evening, Jeremy Pilon from Saskatchewan Government Insurance.
Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Petra, for starting this evening off in a great way. For those who don't know me, I am Jeremy Pilon. I'm with Saskatchewan Government Insurance. I'm a communications consultant there in the Media Relations Department. I've been with SGI for 15 years. This is my third Solstice Speaker Series hosting it. Looking forward to it very much today. Prior to getting the panel up here and introducing them and hearing the drumming, we're going to invite MLA Derek Myers to bring greetings on behalf of Parks, Culture, and Sports Minister Laura Ross. Derek?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank Knowledge Keeper Tim for the thoughtful blessing. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 4 territory, and we acknowledge the land in an act of reconciliation to those whose traditional territories we're on. It is an honor to be here for session 1 of season 2, and I'm here on behalf of Premier Scott Moe and Minister Ross of Parks, Culture, and Sport. Tonight is an important discussion, and I'm very thankful to be in attendance. We have an amazing panel tonight who will answer questions around Pope Francis's trip to Canada and how we move forward together. This evening's program also features the Wolf Creek Drummers and Dancers. I'm looking forward to that. It's nice to see so many youth here as well and involved. And in closing, I would like to thank the Royal Saskatchewan Museum staff, the Friends of the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, Craig and everybody, and SGI for being here and making the SGI Solstice Speaker Series program a success. So thank you once again. I look forward to the program and hope everyone enjoys the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Last year, the Solstice Speaker Series put the spotlight on Indigenous culture by offering a platform for our province's Indigenous leaders so they could share their stories and their learnings. SGI is proud to continue to support the Solstice Speaker Series. We would also like to acknowledge the board members of the Friends of the Royal Saskatchewan Museum who are in attendance. Is anybody here from the board? Stand up. Where are you at? There's one. Everybody say hi to the board from the Friends of the Royal Sask. Who's been to the Solstice Speaker Series before? Put up your hands. Or yeah, let's clap. That way we can hear you. All right, well, welcome back, welcome back. All right, to bring further greetings from SGI, I'd like to welcome up Don Anaquad, Director of Talent Acquisition, Diversity, and Inclusion, to bring those greetings from SGI. Don?
Thank you. First, I just want to say the energy, it's wonderful seeing so many people who I haven't seen for some time. So I just want to take a moment before I say a few words that I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered tonight on Treaty 4 land, the territory of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. So I'm honored to be here on behalf of SGI to celebrate the beginning of our second season of the Solstice Speaker Series. A large part of SGI's commitment to creating an inclusive and equitable environment is continuing to build partnerships with Indigenous communities across the province. And supporting the Speaker Series is a very important piece of that. These events elevate Indigenous voices and experiences, and they spark meaningful discussions and actions that help us move forward in towards a positive future. Through last year's series, we saw live performances. We had hard but important discussions about residential schools and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And we were challenged to reflect on how we can move forward together as we acknowledge the truth and as we strive for reconciliation. Indigenous voices found a platform and everybody was engaged in the conversation. And it wasn't just at the event, but it went beyond the event, because all those who attended, no doubt, brought what they learned into conversation with family and friends. I'm confident that this next season of events will continue to help us move forward in a positive way. And how better to start than a discussion about the Pope's apology with 3 amazing leaders from our community: Chief Cadmus Delorme, Lori Campbell, and Melissa Mbarki. So thank you to the Friends of the Royal Saskatchewan Museum for giving a platform to these strong voices and for creating a space that ignites active participation towards reconciliation. I look forward to another full season of thoughtful, challenging, and inspiring conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Now, tell me my mic's going to continue working. Can you hear me? No. I'll go back to this mic then. All right, thank you very much. One of the things we like to showcase during this Solstice Speaker Series is some of our talented youth and some of the community around. The Solstice Speaker Series tonight's in two parts. There's the part you guys are going to see here in the auditorium. There's also people that are watching online on YouTube or through a streaming service. They're going to miss this next part. So for those of you that brave the cold, we get a special presentation tonight for the live audience. They're going to be doing an honor song to start out, and an honor song cannot be filmed, cannot be taped. So for those of you watching the live feed, this is going to go dark for a little while. Just know that we'll be back in a couple minutes. And for those of you that are here, we get to experience something a little bit differently. So I'd like everyone to please welcome Wolf Creek Drum and Dance Troupe to the stage for an honor song. Let's give it up for Wolf Creek. Tonight we're gathering to discuss the recent visits of to Pope Francis to Canada, who is, of course, the head of the Catholic Church. The visit was in response to the 58th call to action that arose out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Pope came to Canada to offer an apology for the harms caused by the church in the residential schools. Tonight we're going to talk about that apology, how it was received, where it succeeded, where it may have failed, and what comes next for residential school survivors, Canadians, and for the Roman Catholic Church. I'm going to be introducing our panelists shortly, but I thought it was really important for us, if we're going to have this conversation tonight, to understand what the 58th call to action was. There are about 4 or 5 calls to actions for religious groups and organizations, but the 58th one specifically called on the Catholic Church, and it reads as follows. We call upon the Pope to issue an apology to survivors, their families, and communities for the Roman Catholic Church's role in the spiritual, cultural, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children in the Catholic-run residential schools. We call for that apology to be similar to the 2010 apology issued to Irish victims of abuse and to occur within 1 year of the issuing of this report and to be delivered by the Pope in Canada. So obviously we're going to talk about that a lot more tonight, but first let's introduce the members of our panel. So our first person that will be with us tonight is Chief Cadmus Delorme of Cowessess First Nation. We also have Lori Campbell here from the University of Regina. She's the Associate Vice President of Indigenous Engagement. And Melissa Mbarki, Policy Analyst and Outreach Coordinator for Macdonald-Laurier Institute. So here's the format that we'll be following. We want to keep it fairly simple so we can allow a conversation to occur that is open to ideas and so we can explore this without being too restricted. But of course we have to be time conscious, so we're going to have some guidelines. So first, each panelist is going to come up, give a brief opening statement describing their personal background as well as what the apology means for them. Once everyone's opened with their remarks, we're going to sit down and I'll be moderating a discussion with them and ask them some questions so we can learn more about some of the next steps that are available to the community so that we can assist each other moving forward. And then in closing, we will allow each panelist to wrap up their comments with some final statements. So first of all, I'm going to call up Chief Cadmus Delorme, who is a Cree and Saulteaux. He is the Chief of Cowessess First Nation. Chief Delorme graduated from Cowessess Community Education Center in 2000. He moved to Regina to pursue a Bachelor of Business Administration and a certificate in Hospitality, Tourism, and Gaming Entertainment Management from the First Nations University of Canada, and a Master of Public Administration from the Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy. Recently, he's completed an Institute of Corporate Directors designation. In 2012, Chief Delorme received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, recognizing his student leadership. He was also named one of CBC Saskatchewan's Future 40, which celebrates the province's new generation of leaders, builders, and changemakers under the age of 40. In 2019, Chief Delorme was re-elected to a second term in office, and under his leadership, Cowessess First Nation has focused on economic self-sustainability for its nation and its people, and has moved forward on renewable energy, agriculture, efficiency in land use initiatives, and that has created both current and future business opportunities for everyone on Cowessess. Chief Delorme, would you like to come up and open up for us tonight?
Thank you. Nanaskamun, thank you very much. My bio doesn't include my 5 minutes, so my 5 minutes starts right now. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for the opportunity. Tim is a mentor of mine. Thank you for that blessing. To the drum group, a couple of my friends there dance powwow, and it's really nice to see the just sharing our beautiful songs, so thank you very much. And to all of you for coming to spend the evening. You could have been anywhere, and you're here to share in discussion. To the sponsors and everybody who made this happen. This is a reconciliation, and you cannot have reconciliation without uncomfortable conversations. And that's what we're about to have. And I'm going to say things, and I could know my great panelists that I'm with are going to say things that may be triggering. And let's just acknowledge that everybody is at a different healing journey in this journey of truth and reconciliation, calls to action. For Indigenous people, survivors, and family of survivors, this is a very tough topic to discuss. But it has to happen. To my Canadian friends and family, first generation and generational Canadians, the unmarked graves that have been identified and validated shows that many of us now put down our shield and admit we don't know much about the truth between Indigenous people and Canada. And so in my last 3.5 minutes, I am going to share with you some direct points of the Pope's visit. And just to make sure I don't get it wrong, I don't normally read from my notes, but I am going to look down just because I want to make sure I get this right. Number 58, as my friend shared already, says the following. It specifically calls on the Pope to issue an apology for the Roman Catholic Church's role in the spiritual, cultural, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children in Catholic-run residential schools. That is what the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action calls to action. They're not recommendations. The intent of this was that survivors would not only hear remorse, but an acceptance of responsibility for what they were put through at the hands of the church and other institutions. That's the intent. The Pope's apology left a deep hole, and I'm not here to try to be pessimistic. I'm here to let us know that when we are implementing the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, that we have to make sure we truly hold each other accountable in the best interest that we're going to get to this end goal. And so please, I'm going to be very open, and I don't mean to sound bitter or trigger anybody, but I just want to leave a couple of words on the left a deep hole in the acknowledgement of the full role of the church in the residential school system by placing blame on individual members of the church. And this is what the Pope said. I ask forgiveness in particular for the ways in which many members of the church and of religious communities cooperated, not least through their indifference in projects of cultural destruction and forced assimilation, promoted by governments of that time which accumulated in the system of residential schools. That's what the Pope said. Absolutely honored that he came here to fulfill number 58. But this is something we have to understand in the truth. This is the uncomfortableness. And I'm going to close it with two last sayings here. The Catholic Church was not just an agent of the state, but a lead co-author of the darkest chapters in the history of the land we share. If there are Roman Catholic faith people in this room, please, we inherited this. This is not to discredit what we believe in today, but we must understand there's some really uncomfortable truths we have to understand. There are clear examples in our history where the church called the government of Canada to be more aggressive and bold. At one time, way before we were ever in existence on sharing this land, there was that time. And lastly, it was more than the work of a few bad actors. This was an institution effort to remove children from their families and cultures, all in the name of Christian supremacy. And in conclusion, let's have a conversation. The Pope came, the Pope apologized. We now pick up the action as Canadians because we inherited this, and when you inherit something, we have a responsibility to do something about it. And I tell you, in this province, I really know we're ready, so I look forward to a conversation. Thank you, Nanaskaman. Thank you. Do I go sit down over there?
Thank you, Chief. Our next panelist, Melissa Mbarki, grew up on the Musqueam First Nation and attended residential school, which was one of the last to close in 1997. She will talk about what this experience was like, having a residential school in her backyard. The community impacts were devastating, and they're still trying to rebuild with the little resources that they have. She left the reserve when she was 17 for higher education and later started her career in the natural resources sector. She's worked on pipeline projects that crossed 3 provinces, including a large-scale acquisition project that involved billions of dollars in oil and gas assets and a land transfer for a treaty land entitlement settlement. The most rewarding part of her career is working with environmental groups and land reclamation. This allowed her to bring the traditional knowledge that she learned from her mushum and combine it with current-day practices. The work she currently does with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute combines the challenges she faced as a child with current-day policy solutions. To Melissa, reconciliation is the work and inclusion of Indigenous voices. Melissa, would you like to come and give your introduction?
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I am back home. This is my home. I actually grew up an hour and a half northeast of Regina. I grew up on Muskowgan Reserve. I know it's quite a mouthful when you try to say it, along with my last name, which is Mbarki. So that's always challenging. My residential school was one of the last to close in 1997. It housed 150 plus students. These students came to the public school in which we all attended together along with the town kids and the surrounding communities. So we got to know these children. They were our friends. They were children that we grew up with. They were children that left too soon. They went home on holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. Some of them never came back, and some of them didn't come back due to tragic events or suicide. That's what these schools were. We lost quite a bit of people. Even today, the people in our community, they lost their identity. They came out not knowing who they were. They came out with little education. And for me, I was really on the fence with the apology, with the Pope coming to Canada. I didn't know what this would do for my community. I didn't know what this would do to parents of children they lost. But I went into it with an open heart. I went into it with, I will accept whatever comes of this apology. I know it's going to bring up a lot of anger. It's going to bring up a lot of hurt. It's going to bring up a lot of emotions in my community, because we had experienced quite a big loss and quite a number of students along the way. So when he did make the apology, I was in Muscatcheese when he apologized, and it got quiet. Nobody knew how to react. But once he said it, and once he said, "I'm sorry," there was a relief in the room. So a lot of us took it differently. Some people accepted it because that's what they needed to hear. Others didn't process it right away. And like myself, I didn't know. I didn't know what to take away from it until after the fact. So when I thought about it, and I thought about what reconciliation is, it's something that we do after the apology. It's the work, it's the hard work that we're going to have to do in our communities. Because many of our communities, especially mine, we don't have the resources. The last school, my school closed in 1997, and to this day, we don't have a drug and alcohol treatment center. We don't have healing services. We have absolutely nothing. So if you're going to come and apologize to my community, bring something with you. Bring us hope. Bring us a hope for tomorrow. Help us with facilities to help my community members who were impacted by residential schools. This is what we're asking for. We're not looking to place the blame on anyone. We're not looking to place the blame on the Pope, the government. They all had a hand in this. But what we have to do now is we have to work towards a better tomorrow. And that's where the action comes in. We have to help the people in my community. We have to give them resources so that they can heal. We need more knowledge keepers like Tim in our communities. We desperately need this. And for survivors, they need somebody that they can relate to and talk to. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm looking for the services. I'm looking for the help. I'm looking for the advocates that can help me bring healing centers to the communities that were impacted. Every single one of us, every single Indigenous person today was impacted by the residential schools. If it wasn't friends, it was our parents, it was our grandparents, it was our great-grandparents. All of us were impacted. And I think that's the messaging that we have to get out there, is that not one of us escaped the effects of residential school. All of us took some harm from that. So today, and for reconciliation, it's working together and helping each other, because that's what true reconciliation is that we help each other. And I'm hoping through discussions like this, we can open ideas, we can bring solutions to the table, because that's what we need. And I thank you for coming here today. A lot of you didn't have to come here and listen to this very hard conversation. It is hard to listen to. You know, it's not an easy one to have. It's not an easy one for me to speak about. But if we work together and we find solutions, we can move mountains. And that's what I hope to do. That's the legacy that I hope to leave on behalf of my communities, to help other people. And I thank all of you for coming here today and listening.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for your patience with my butchered pronunciations. I will do better. Laurie Campbell has arrived, I believe. Give us a wave. Are you there? There you are. All right. So Laurie Campbell is Two-Spirit and is a member of Montreal Lake First Nation in Treaty 6 territory. She's an intergenerational survivor of the Indian residential school system and a child from the 60s Scoop generation. Laurie has made it her career advocating for social justice and working towards a more equitable society for all. With over 13 years of progressive leadership in student services, academics, research, and administration, Laurie is an experienced leader in education. Through the sharing of her lived experiences, traditional knowledge, and professional proficiencies, she provides uncomfortable truths required for advancing the processes of decolonization, indigenization, and reconciliation within organizations and communities. Laurie holds 2 undergraduate degrees in Indigenous Studies and Psychology, a master's degree in adult education, and is a PhD candidate in social justice education. She currently holds the position of Associate Vice President, Indigenous Engagement at the University of Regina. Laurie, would you like to give your introduction? Laurie, are you there for us now?
I have the audio here. I can
All
hear
right.
you.
Well, we might have to loop back to you, Laurie. Once we get your audio up and running, we will bring you into the conversation. All right. So let's have a conversation about the Pope's visit. So where did you all first take in the visit? I guess you mentioned you were at home. Cadmus, where were you when you took in the visit?
Thank you. We on Cowessess First Nation had the Marivelle Residential School, Roman Catholic run from 1898 to 1996 when we closed our doors. And we had a day on Cowessess. We started off with ceremony in the morning, started off in good way with prayers. We had the live streamed in our hall. Our hall is our last building that was tied to the residential school in the church. Today it houses community events, and one of our most important days of the week, bingos, so on Cowessess. And we held it there. We invited survivors, community members, youth, and locals, non-Indigenous people. And we had a packed hall. We listened to it live. After that, we went up to the Powwow Arbor, and we did one of the best things we could do to help our survivors. And we sang our songs that have been with us for generation, danced our style in powwow, and had an afternoon of powwow. And it was a day of reflection, day of mourning, and a day of celebration that Indigenous people are still alive and very proud of who we are today.
Melissa, did you have a similar day? Was there a lot of community around?
No, I wasn't in my community the day that the Pope apologized. I was actually at the grounds in Muscatcheese.
Oh, right.
And it was it was an emotional day for for everyone that was there. I don't think anybody really knew what to expect on that day. We didn't know how people would react to it. So the survivors that were there had a lot of support, and I was really happy to see that. And it was just, there was almost a sigh of relief. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it was almost like a weight was kind of lifted. And then it was up to us to kind of take that back and kind of examine our own personal, individual experience and kind of work through that. But it was a day filled with emotions. It was a long day, and it was a long day for a lot of the survivors. But it was a good day. It was, we got the apology that was asked for in one of the calls to action. And, it was a start to something, I feel. And it was a start to conversations like this.
I don't know if Laurie's back yet. All right, well, did your emotions change through that day? Like you mentioned the sigh of relief. Was there confusion or anger, anything that came out as the day went on, or?
Everything came out that day with different people that I spoke to throughout the day had different emotions. You can see it play out on social media. I mean, that's where you got the varying reactions from everyone, and it was expected. We weren't all expected to react the same way or to feel the same way about it, and social media kind of told that story for us.
How about for you emotionally throughout that day? How did your feelings change through the day? Was it happiness followed by sadness, or was it consistent?
My role as a individual is to make my parents proud, to make Indigenous people proud that reconciliation can happen, and I focus more on other people than really any emotions I was feeling. I thought of my parents throughout the day, and just leading up to our event. When we were planning it and engaging, some survivors are like, well, I'm not coming that day. I'm just going to go home and, take the day off, like they just almost, in everybody's different journey is some are ready, some are not. Everybody's at a different stage. And when the event happened, it was very quiet in the hall. We watched it on a newscast, so the anchor of CBC was talking before, so, there was some comments made and some people would kind of say something. And then when the actual apology happened, it was silent in the room. And, there were certain parts, you can just feel the tension in the room. And then when the moment of the headdress came, 2 survivors walked out. It was too much for them. And then, later on at the arbor, we had some moments of reflection as well. And one survivor made a comment to me, and he said, I'm learning my Cree language today. He says, but every time I speak the Cree that I remember, I look over my left shoulder because there's a nun there ready to hit me, he said. And, it's moments like this that we have to understand that the Pope came, the Pope apologized. For many of us who have never stepped foot in a residential school, including myself, I'm not a residential school survivor, we have hope and optimistic that we're going to get there. But we just can't assume that everybody's at the same stage we're at, ready to have reconciliation. That's why we must take that moment to reflect on truth. And we will get there together, but we just have to understand it. That's kind of the emotions I felt that day is I get told, slow down, Chief. You're going too fast. And I just get so excited, to focus on the end goal. So that's kind of how I felt throughout the day is 58 happened. And now we are all here the day after, the month after, and we all have actions to take.
Yeah. Do you think the Pope fully understood what he was apologizing for, what he came here for?
I wasn't at the Vatican, and I take it that question was for me. Sorry, I just started talking. Calm down, Chief. You just tell me. I wasn't at the Vatican. I wasn't in Musqueam. I worked with Don, the archdiocese. I worked with other across the country. I was on many calls and giving, my opinions from what I was hearing from Maryville and some residential school survivors. And the key things to make sure you meant the Pope had to mention. And, that's the role I really tried to make an impact on was the preparation side of things. And so I really sensed that, the intent of the Pope was there on his flight back when he mentioned, and confirmed the genocide part of it. I think he really had his heart in the right place. But, openly, the Pope probably has people he answers to, and he was probably, unable to probably say everything. But, 58 happened, and here we are today.
Melissa, what are your thoughts on that? I know one of the things mentioned was on his flight out of Canada, he talked about genocide and how he hadn't used the word then, but he would use it there. Do you think the Pope came with a full understanding of what had happened and what was expected of him?
I hope he did. I hope he meant the apology because that does mean a lot to, and it would mean a lot to survivors today. The one thing that I was really happy that was acknowledged was assimilation. These schools, they weren't for learning. They absolutely were not there for education. They were there to take the Indian out of the child. They were there to take the culture, the language, everything that the children knew, they were there to take it away from them. And I think acknowledging that is a huge step in reconciliation, because if these schools, if they were meant for education, we would have one of the highest educated populations in this country, and we don't. And that needed to be acknowledged in order for us to move on. So I think the gesture or the apology that he came for, he accomplished it, number 58. You can check it off the list. Now, the important part is where we go from here. the actions of him and the actions of the Catholic Church are going to be very telling in the next little while, what that apology meant and the work that's going to be done to bring reconciliation to our communities.
What are some of the first things you're hoping to see the Catholic Church do in practice now?
I hope they work with their surrounding communities. I really do. There's a Catholic Church that's in my community. I hope they reach out to their neighbors and they start working with them, not in a religious sense, but we came to your community and we built this humongous school on your reserve. What can we build to help you in the aftermath? What can we help? Can we help you with a treatment center, drug and addiction center? How can we help? And this is what we need. And I'm hoping that they do, they help us with our community. I really do.
You mentioned that you had some members of the Catholic Church join you at the hall to watch the apology. Have you heard some of those first steps from that community, from that church?
The most important table of reconciliation is the kitchen table in each one of our homes. And when it comes to reconciliation and the role the church plays, the gathering place of these kitchen tables to the church is what is the tone and understanding and truth of that conversation. I'll be very, very open. I speak about this quite publicly, and I was speaking last week, and this guy came up to me, and he says, "I'm sure glad you didn't say genocide." And I was like, okay. I was like, thanks for sharing. And he says, "Did you dig up any of those graves?" And I was like, no. "Okay, so you don't know if they're children." And I'm like, I know where you're coming from, I told him. And I was like, I told him, you kind of got to stop being ignorant of the history, I told him. And he debated with me, and I said, okay, look, you're even being ignorant of your ignorance, I told him. Like, calm down, I told him. And like, I confirmed what he thought by saying, no, we didn't dig up any, and we don't plan to, because we know it's in our oral stories. It's in the experience that some bury in here of what we do know. And why I start there and what the church can do is the church must hold each other accountable in the truth. It's not Indigenous people that now have to validate the truth. Reconciliation is also where the non-Indigenous and non-survivor groups have to start being that true, support ally. And I'm not calling out anybody in this room or listening that you're not. But when you come across that ignorance, be our side by side. And we get tired of it as Indigenous people, sometimes validating what we already know. And so the role the church plays is the mind, is the thought. But secondly, what is sleeping? The language. We always say, and there's no real enough proof that, the church is a very rich institution. But what role is the church playing to partner with government to strengthen that language, to strengthen that identity? And, we have to understand that Indigenous people, and as a chief, I manage poverty every day as a leader. Like, the mental and physical and emotional is real, and what chiefs and councils have to manage. And then your off reserve is very dependent on the municipal and provincial. And so the church must adjust its strategy that truth must come first, but then what resources and partnerships can they play with governments to strengthen the language and the culture? It's a strategy. It's not going to happen overnight, but that conversation has to happen across this country. All the Catholic decision makers have to unite on it, and then that strength will come. Indigenous people, we're going to persevere and get stronger. We just need ones beside us, like institutions like the Roman Catholic Church and governments, to not just put us in a grant conversation, but put us in a long-term sustaining, where our culture will truly, come back strong, and I guarantee you this entire land we share will be so different in one generation.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the apology came short. It didn't acknowledge the organizational role of the church in this. Do you think there's a follow-up required? And maybe it's not Pope Francis that comes back, but maybe the church takes a more active role in finishing that apology?
The numbers, our calls to action are there. We fulfilled 13 of them to date. Like, we have 94 calls to action. We've completed 13 of them. Right now with our queen that just passed away, and now King Charles III, number 45 is being discussed right now. Like, that's the topic of the day, the doctrine on reconciliation. And now, are we going to focus on that? Next thing, so where I'm going with this is, we got to understand as Canadians, as Saskatchewanians, as Indigenous people, significant top tone is going to come and do their part. Then Prime Minister Harper did it in 2008. That was pre-TRC, but that was kind of the opening of what TRC led to. The Pope came in 2022. In 2008, what impact did that actually make on our relationship in this province and country? I don't feel our relationship is much stronger. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I'll give you an example. When the Bushi case hit that night, the Cowessess gas station lost 40% of our profit for 3 weeks because non-Indigenous people stopped and saying, can I go on to reserve right now? Like, as much as we want to say we're getting stronger, we got to realize we still got a lot of truth to address. And so where I'm going to end this one is, we will have tone at the top come, but where reconciliation is going to happen is us here. No one is going to really come to help us in our long-term strategy. We must learn to try help one another. We must learn to look to our left, look to our neighbors, look to our municipalities, look to our cities, look to our governments, look to our First Nations in leadership and just good leaders out there that are non-elected, and let's put our shield down and let's just figure out a strategy together. That is the true part to get to the end of reconciliation.
And Melissa, to kind of expand on that a little, and I think I had seen it in some of the tweets you had talked about after the apology. It cost a lot of money to bring the Pope here. Could have dug a lot of wells. What are your thoughts on that too? Pursuing some of maybe these bigger ticket items where we get the Pope in and it's a photo op, should we be spending that money, to heal these communities and to bring people together?
It was millions to bring him here, for the apology. And when I think about that dollar value, I think about the communities that don't have clean water. I look at our housing. I visit my family on the reserve, and the housing is deplorable. It's in need of repair. But the pandemic hit us really hard, and one of the things that we really recognized was that there was too many families living in one home. Today off reserve you would never see that, but in a reserve you can see 4 families that live in a single home, and that was really detrimental in dealing with COVID, because once one family member got it, the entire family got it. And it opened our eyes to a lot of the disparity that we do have on the reserves. So when we talk about millions of dollars, I think about how that could have went back to our communities, how it could have helped our people, how it could have helped with just basic rights and basic needs. That's excluding, treatment centers and healing centers. We're just talking about basic human rights. And to not have clean water today is just mind-blowing. Like, this is Canada. Like, we have, we're the top, I don't know what it was, the top 10 of having fresh water in the world, and our communities don't have clean water. And that just, for me, I can't even fathom that. Working in the oil and gas sector, I know how easy it is to drill a water well. I know how fast it is to connect homes to pipes. I worked with a county that did it, and we did it in 4 years. We connected over 1,500 homes and businesses in a single county, and we did it in 4 years. And how can that not be done on reserves? So when we talk about money, I don't come at it from a perspective that, it wasn't well spent. It could have been spent elsewhere, and it could have been spent in our communities. And that's one of the things that I really advocate for is my community, because my family still live on the reserve. I come back, this is my home. I come back and I visit them as often as I can, and every time I come back, they're living in the same condition, and it's really heartbreaking, and we can do better. As Canadians, we can do better.
I'm going to shift a little bit, go back to the actual apology itself, and something that happened, and Cadmus, you alluded to it earlier. Chief Littlechild presented the Pope with a headdress, and there was sort of some split opinion on that gift. What are your thoughts, Melissa, I guess, to start on that?
I have my opinion about it. I choose not to share it because it was given from a leader. He did a lot of work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and he was part of bringing the Pope here for an apology. And when it comes from the heart and it comes from the individual, I'm not one to judge that. They're giving something that means something to them, to another person, and I don't come in between with my opinions on it. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. And, that's between the leader and the Pope. Whatever that interaction was, that's between them.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts on it you wanted to share?
Thank you. Again, I'm not a residential school survivor, and I'm going to respond to this one in a way that I observed, I talked, and I listened. And we were in the Cowessess hall. And it was going, what I was observing, I stood in the back of the room so I can see everybody. And if anybody was getting triggered, I would have went sat by them. We had a smudge bowl going. And the social media leading up to it, there was a couple of people posting, they better not give him a headdress. They better not give him, and this is, it was like all this hype. And then the song started, and then the headdress got walked up, and I was just watching the room, like just making sure everybody was all right. And two survivors in different areas stood up and walked out. And I was like, should I go outside? Should I stay inside? And I stayed inside, and I stood there. And I wear a headdress. I represent the Cowessess First Nation. And there's 32 feathers on there, and I was told why there was 32 feathers on there, and I wear it only when it's appropriate. I store it in a place that only my wife, is the one that's responsible. There was guidelines I got given for this headdress. You'll never see me wear it in shorts and a t-shirt. I have to look proper, and I can't do it in an area where there's, lots of alcohol. If there's a mosaic game, I shouldn't be wearing it there. And I got these really strict guidelines, and so I'm learning this. And it took me a lot to conceive it, but Murray Sinclair said it to where I came to a little bit of peace. And this is where I share, please. I don't speak on behalf of survivors because they have their own opinion, but Indigenous ways and what reconciliation is about, that strongest relationship we can build. Indigenous people have always implemented our treaty obligations. The Crown hasn't. We always make sure we treat our Crown relations in the best way possible. In this case, we had somebody, and this is where Murray Sinclair spoke to it, we had somebody come to our land because we asked them to. And this person was the top tone of one of the biggest institutions in our world. And what Chief did is he gave him his spiritual connection. That was his headdress. And he did that, for the understanding that Indigenous people, we honor somebody with one of the most sacred items in our means, to let them know that we look forward to getting to that end goal. And this is something that we keep at high sacred And we expect that same tone from you in this journey. And when Murray Sinclair shared that, it put me more than understanding and reminded me of my role as one individual, and that's to keep that end goal in mind, that all Indigenous people want parity. And our relationship with the church will change. And hopefully that moment shows our appreciation to giving something very sacred that means a lot to us. I say that in the means that I'm still conceiving, but that's how I see it at this moment.
Okay. I had a question that I was going to ask Lori, but I'll put it to both of you, because Lori had mentioned in a talk that she had given that we as Canadians, as the colonizers, need to stop asking Indigenous people to explain things to us. But as you mentioned, Cadmus, there's a lot of people out there that are ignorant of their ignorance. How can Canadians get past that hump, get past the ignorance of their ignorance, and start to learn what we need to know in order to move forward through truth and reconciliation? Sir, Melissa, with you.
I think one of the ways, what's coming up in our journey are the unmarked graves. My reserve actually found ours by accident. They were fixing a water line behind the school, and they came across 34 remains of children. It was found. We brought in the RCMP. They investigated it. They deemed that they were older remains, so there wasn't anything current. So we found remains in our community. We were actually one of the first ones. And the problem that I'm having is having to explain that to people. Everybody, they send their kids to school today. They expect their child to come home at the end of the day. And when their child doesn't come home, they're going to wonder what happened to them. And we shouldn't have to explain unmarked graves in our community. And I find that the process of reconciliation, that's the ignorance that comes into it. Another thing that people ask is, well, how did they die? That doesn't matter. They were children. They were taken from their parents. If they died from disease or something else, or from abuse, they're there. Help us find them. Help us give them a proper burial, a proper memorial. The question of how and why and where and when, that's all ignorance. That's people not listening. And, we need people to be a little bit more sympathetic in this situation, because it could have been your children. If you were Indigenous back then, that could have been your children back there. Parents didn't know what happened to their kids. Many of them still don't. We weren't given proper records when these schools closed. And that's one of the things that we're battling right now, is trying to get these records of students that were there, students that didn't make it home, and where are they? And that's one of the things we've been asking from the church for a very long time. So in this situation, we don't need ignorance. We don't need ignorant questions. Just be sympathetic. Help us find our children. Help us give them proper burials, and just help us through this healing process, because it's a pretty big thing to go through. And people asking questions of how, don't ask those questions. That's not for you to know. They're there. Let's give them proper burials now, and let's remember them in a good way.
Thank you. Chief, any thoughts on how to get past the ignorance of our ignorance? Not yours, mine.
We gotta be able to have moments of just pause and see how we react, and then we'll know where we're at. The James Smith Cree Nation happened less than 3 weeks ago. There was not a Saskatchewanian that was just ignoring it. Everybody focused because it was impacting us all. And we heard the terrible stories. We seen the media and all that. And the reality is are we asking the right questions after it happened? Reconciliation isn't just about that moment. It's about that could happen in almost any First Nation community in this province right now, because of the mental and emotional stress and lack of resources to address that. Like, we have to understand that we are, and I'm a part of this, we are in a role where our disposable income, many of us, and our means of life and how we were raised, and our kitchen tables and our ability to travel is somewhat of a privilege, and that's not a bad thing. Having privilege is not a bad thing, but it's something that we have to understand. Not everybody has that privilege. And so the ignorance is, we go home tonight, we put our head on our pillow, and in the morning we wake up, we can probably have somewhat of a healthy breakfast. And many that are residential school survivors or family of survivors haven't healed to that stage yet. And it's not that Indigenous people want anybody to, we don't want anybody to feel pitiful for us or feel sorry for us. But the thing we got to understand is we're not truly doing enough as a society. Individuals in this room, I praise you, you're probably going above and beyond as beautiful Canadians playing your part. And that is amazing. But as a society, when we measure ourselves as 1.3 million people in this province, I feel that we have to be able to measure, are we doing enough? One example, Derek, a very good friend of mine, MLA in this province, there has to become a day when the ministers meet in a nice room with chiefs and have a conversation together about a better strategy we can do in this province. That doesn't happen right now. And I talk with Premier. Premier, him and I have very detailed, rich conversations. Derek is on a committee. We're having a beautiful day on September 29th, and I hope you're all coming to Mosaic Stadium. But why I say that is any ignorant mind in this province turns on the news and sees that the Premier and the Cabinet and the MLAs are sitting in a room with chiefs and we're talking about the future together. I tell you, that would change attitudes in this province. We're just not there yet. That's my answer.
It's a great
Final answer.
Fantastic. That even leads into kind of my question is, what role do the Canadian government and the provincial government play, not just in the call to action number 58, but in truth and reconciliation, and maybe outside of that? And you've said it, we need to get people into the room. Melissa, you have any other ideas of how our governments need to maybe step beyond TNC and some new ideas?
We have to know that going forward, working with Indigenous communities, working with Indigenous people, including voices in every decision that's being made in this province, or even as a country, needs to include voices like ours. It doesn't specifically have to be ours, but you need to have an Indigenous voice when it comes to decisions. The reason why I say that is, I've worked on various land deals. And one of the things that we've always had to do was we've always had to backtrack right to the beginning because Indigenous people weren't consulted right from the very start. And that is a very frustrating process, not just when it comes to land, but everything else, child and family, infrastructure, reserves, water. That ties into almost everything that we do and that everything that the province does and the federal government does. So we need to make sure that we have Indigenous voices at the table every single time. Because when we miss that step, we only have problems down the road. And we're having to double back trying to fix those mistakes. When if we had a leader or an Indigenous representative right from the start, those negotiations, those deals would not only go a lot quicker, but it would also be a lot cheaper. And people don't understand that. Mm-hmm. And I think going forward, bringing community voices into these discussions is very important, because reconciliation, if that's what we're truly striving for, that's what it is. That's what it is from my perspective. And I look forward just to seeing how the province, the federal government, and Indigenous reserves, Indigenous people off reserve, I'm looking forward to see how that all plays out in the next few years. I'm looking forward to seeing how these relationships start working, because that's going to be how we measure reconciliation. It's not just about money, it's about those relationships.
Cadmus, any more that you would call on governments to do? Or is it really just getting around the table to start with?
There's about 200, I read this in this article called iPolitics. There's 260 decision makers in this province. Like, we're talking like top decision makers, political and big organizations. Less than 3% of those 260 are Indigenous people. And we're 20% of this province. And we're growing really fast. Like, we're growing at triple population. And people ask why, and I say it's because we're sexy and we know it. That's why we're growing so fast. But you know, the reality is we have to lift the glass ceiling in our organizations. We have to adjust our policies and our means of capacity building when there are Indigenous people ready to grow. And these invisible glass ceilings are real. Sometimes we don't notice them or see them, but if you go to work in the morning and you look around and say, where is the Indigenous growth plan here? That's not a bad thing. That is understanding that our end goal of reconciliation is parity, is to make sure that all have that opportunity. And so it's upon our governments to make sure that they mandate their goals. Example, SaskPower. SaskPower has a procurement in renewable energy. It states in there, any company externally, internally wants to build renewable energy projects, who is your Indigenous partner? It doesn't ask if you have an Indigenous partner. So any renewable project you see in this province, there is an Indigenous partner to it. And the Indigenous nations and companies like FHQ, Cowessess Ventures, George Gordon, just throwing out a few, they are now a part of renewable energy, and it is a part of our growth for the future. So it's the governments have to set their own internal mandates to address the glass ceilings.
Excellent. And we'll get one, I guess we got a couple more questions we can get in here before closing remarks, but let's just talk about the average Joe. And you talked about the conversation around the dinner table. What are some other things that just your average Canadian should be doing moving forward, coming out of the Pope's apology, but also just out of Truth and Reconciliation? Melissa?
I've had a lot of people ask me that lately. How can we help? What can we do? My answer to this is, if people want to play a role in this and they truly want to help our communities, they can write to their MLAs, they can write to their MPs, they can pick any one of the calls to action, any one of the 94, and focus on that and advocate for that, because there isn't enough of that from the non-Indigenous population. From the Indigenous side, that's a lot of work on us. That is a lot of work for one person to take on, to be advocating on 30 different issues. And I think as a Canadian, that's one way people can help. I mean, they want to advocate for clean water, contact your MLA. Look at your local neighboring reserve and see if they have clean water. If they don't, what are some of the solutions? Can they tie into the town infrastructure? Can they help them build, or can they help them with their treatment plant? There's a lot of ways that people can help if they look. And I think that's one of the first steps in doing this. And it's advocating with your local leaders, non-Indigenous leaders. That's the way that we're going to get our voices louder and heard. And that is the best way to help us, because we're expended. Like, we do enough. Like, I wouldn't want to be a chief, because he's dealing with everything on his reserve, from funerals to planning to the business, everything. And I wouldn't want that position. And that is a lot for a single person to take on, never mind an advocacy group. And that's how Canadians can help. That's how you can generally help us. And that would go a long way.
Cadmus, any more thoughts on that?
Thank you. I go back to the moments we had and the moments we're going to have. The James Smith Cree Nation. Did we do enough as a city? And if we didn't, we should be strategizing to what we can do better in the next situation that's going to come, because they are going to happen. And you go past, you go backwards. There's the Pope's visit. What did we do as a city? We're a small enough city where we kind of get to go to our one Costco and see each other eventually. We're not a huge city, and that's the advantage of living in Regina, is we are a small enough city where we are truly a community. And are we doing enough? We have more things happening. The north, when the fires happen, our University of Regina campus, we get guests from the north that have to evacuate their communities. Are we doing enough? Are we learning? And then lastly, are we asking the right questions? The reason we come up with our answers is sometimes we're asking the wrong questions. No disrespect to media. I'm friends with all media. But sometimes media tend to miss the question we're actually trying to ask in that situation. And so, what can we do as allies to reconciliation? Is it really takes us a lot to make sure we know the truth, then we move to reconciliation. Sometimes we just jump right into reconciliation, and we get to the end and we look back and we're like, okay, we're missing half of the people we're supposed to be here with reconciliation. And I'm one of that. I'm a person at home as a chief, and I get people to tell me, Chief, slow down, you're going too fast. Then I get someone else, Chief, we should have did this 20 years ago, keep going. And I'm like, I know, right? And just make sure that if we're on a treadmill, that's not action. That let's just make sure we assess that change comes with resources, with action, with understanding. And so let's just prepare our beautiful city and our beautiful surrounding and communities to truly get it. And lastly, September 15th was Treaty 4 anniversary, 148 years. We are all treaty people. We some of us went to Fort Capel, our kids did, but do we truly understand what that day means to us? Because we all benefit because of that treaty. And, we have to understand that residential schools, the Indian Act, the 60s Scoop, those are things that happen we must address for the healing. But there's beautiful things out there that we can partake in. Tim, is a lodge keeper. If anybody's ever interested in wanting to know more about the ceremonial side, we got beautiful places like that we can go. And it's not a place where you can just go and just, think you want to do it. There is protocol. And please, I'm not just saying go to an Indigenous ceremony, or if there's an event happening like a round dance or a powwow, take part in it, because sometimes we hear so much of the negative side of our history. We forget the fact that Indigenous people have rights, we're rights holders, and we still have a beautiful society and laws that we don't talk enough about.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, and last question before closing remarks. What question did I miss here? What have I not asked? You hinted at it, but is there something we haven't discussed tonight that maybe we should be?
I can't think of anything right now. I would, you asked a lot of good questions about how the communities can help, and I thought that was a really good start to reconciliation. and just asking questions. There's no better way to start reconciliation than asking what a community needs and how people can help. And that goes a very, very long way.
Chief?
Thank you. I'm going to make a little more uncomfortableness here for the topics that we're talking about. I'm going to speak open. I'm going to put my shield down as an individual who gets it, and I see it, and I'm so looking forward to the long journey together. My fear right now is faith. Is in the Indigenous canoe, if anybody heard my last speech, in the Indigenous means of our healing, so much has happened to us that many question faith. And when you don't have a strong faith, it's really tough to remain long-term optimistic sometimes. And if some choose the spiritual side, I love it. If some choose the religious side, I love it. But some are questioning faith, and they walk this beautiful land with no prayer. And I'm not judging, I'm just cautious that every one of us have some kind of a prayer or some kind of a means that collects us in that third sphere that nobody sees. You know, the outside sphere, everybody sees. That second layer, only our closest see, but that inner one is only you see. And that's my caution. And reason I bring it up right now is some have not and may not ever forgive the Roman Catholic Church for the role they played. I will never judge them. I will stand by them. But my response to them is, but you got to have faith somewhere, because prayer is going to make us stronger. And that's something we have to understand. And sometimes it's tough not to think of your own position or opinion on it, as I do, because in order to get to that end goal, every kitchen table needs to have some kind of faith. And that is where these conversations are important. And I just want to bring this up because, you know, our loss of control and the Indigenous canoe of where we're getting stronger, you know, faith is one of them. Language is one of them. Social life is one of them. Culture is one of them. Identity. And I'm not painting the brush that Indigenous people are pitiful people. We're very strong, beautiful people. But I hope you know where I'm going with this when I say this, is that because of what we inherited, some will always get very upset when they talk about Christianity or religion. And then some will question the spiritual side of the Indigenous means just because for 2-3 generations it was removed. And so we have a interesting moment for our ones that we all want to have the best life. And I leave that as my last comment, not to keep you in a gray area, but just understand everybody's at a different journey, and we must nudge each other for the strongest foundation possible on what we inherited. I share that.
Thanks. Well, I have no more questions and no more discussion. We have little time now for wrap up. I'm going to let Melissa go first because we heard how long Cadmus can go. So if they cut off the live feed, it'll be him. You'll get your bit in. So anything you'd like to wrap up tonight's conversation with?
What I'd like to say is that we're resilient people. If we can survive residential schools, survive reserves, and still be sitting on this stage today, that just shows how resilient and strong we are. And Cadmus spoke about faith, and that takes me back to something my musham had told me, because we had a household where my grandmother was a survivor of the residential school, and she took on the Catholic faith, and my mushum took on the traditional role. So when we were kids, we were always confused as to which way to go. Do we go with grandma to church, or do we go with my mushum to a sweat lodge? There was always that dichotomy of which is the right one or which is the right way. And there was something that my mushum told us. He said, it doesn't matter what you believe. He said, as long as you believe in something. You can go to church with your grandma and you can come with me to a sweat lodge. The fact that you're believing is what we want from our grandchildren. And that always stuck with me, and I tell that to my brothers and sisters. Not all of us took on this traditional path. My brother, he believes in Christianity. I'm not there to change him. He's not there to change me. We respect each other's belief. And it goes back to the kitchen table of, what's happening in our Indigenous homes. And when we start to accept each other for what we believe, we can go a long way. We don't have to choose one or the other. You can choose whichever faith you want to believe in, as long as you believe in something. And I just want to leave that with, whoever's listening today, because maybe there's that kind of divergent of what to choose and what not to choose. Doesn't matter. You're going to take on whatever is more comfortable with you. And I just want to leave that with people.
Thank you. Chief?
All right.
I'm seeing Knowledge Keeper Petra nodding off, so you have as much time as you need, but he's...
I thank you all for spending the evening, your time, on such an important topic. And we are getting stronger. There is so much great happening out there. And let's just make sure that we acknowledge that and give gratitude for the strength we're gaining. The challenge we always face is the fuel that's going to get us there is more of the things we're not doing. And don't take that as we're not getting there. We're getting there. I see more and more Indigenous youth succeeding in sports. I see adults more and more just starting to gain that strength to get out there. Our language is getting stronger. And so, but use the where we're not getting strong enough as fuel. And be an ally. Be that, stand beside. And when we're not in the room as an Indigenous person, be our ally. And if someone is being what we kind of identify as ignorant, correct them. Don't argue with them. Correct them. And if they don't comply, I always tell the youth, just be like those penguins on Madagascar. Just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave. Because not getting mad, but just correcting and letting them think about it is reconciliation. We have to remain calm as we're getting there. And you are an amazing person to sit beside and speak. I just want to give you credit. And thank you, SGI, for not checking my one speeding ticket and sponsoring tonight. And you are a great host. And Laurie, I've spoke with before. We missed a great voice tonight. And I just wanted to recognize Laurie. I know it's not her fault. But anyways, I'll leave my comments there. So thank you very much to Craig and everybody for making this happen.
Thank you both. I'd like to add my voice to thanking Laurie. She did come out tonight. She couldn't make it here, and unfortunately we had some tech issues. So hopefully we get to hear from Laurie again in the future, because I agree it would have been even more rich conversation with her. So we're just about done for the night, but I think we all enjoyed the band that was out earlier with, it's Wolf Willow? Wolf Creek. I got it wrong. Wolf Creek. We heard them before, and I wanted to hear more, and they didn't want to play more, but let's get them up again one more time tonight. Thank you again to Wolf Creek. Let's give it up. We hope that tonight's discussion will set a path for your continued participation with the series in the year ahead. We're going to have some more announcements coming on episode 2 in December, and what our featured topics and guest speakers will be coming for the next in the next couple months. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share with us that might be interesting, or maybe some comments and feedback, there is an email. Send it to Solstice Speaker Series at frsm.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again to our panelists, to Melissa Mbarki, to Chief Cadmus Delorme, and to Laurie Campbell, who wasn't able to join us, for everything. Let's give it up for our panelists. And I didn't get a full list of everyone to thank, but Knowledge Keeper Petra, thank you for coming again. And to everyone at the FRSM, Derek from the Government of Saskatchewan for joining us, and for everybody that helps to put this on, Graffiti TV. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks for coming out this evening. Your support is much appreciated. And as I say at the end of all of these, I'm legally obliged as an employee of SGI to remind you to drive safe tonight. Good night.